Okay, so we're now on the second.
Yeah, asking for a large refund.
Right. We're rolling, so whenever you're ready.
The following presentation is brought to you by ACT Trust. I'm Scott Drake. I'm a legal broadcast editor. And the Los Angeles Daily Journal tax law expert Rob Wood tries to answer the question, if I receive a large refund come tax time, I'm pretty happy. Does this increase my chances of getting audited? Rob Wood is a partner of Wood Porter in San Francisco and hosts the Tax Law Channel here on the Legal Broadcast Network. Hi, Rob.
Hi, Scott.
That's a question that I've thought of myself frequently, even though I usually don't get any kind of large refund. But it seems like a logical question that if you're getting a lot of money back, that the IRS might scrutinize you a little more.
Yeah, and I think you have to break it. It is a logical worry, and it's also I guess in some ways it's intuitive, and in other ways it's counterintuitive because the idea that you might be entitled to a lot of money back and that you might decide not to ask for it seems a little bizarre. So I think splitting the issue into a couple of pieces is important. Probably the first piece is original returns. So if you are filing your tax return and you have either because of excess withholding, maybe your employer's withholding too much money, or maybe you, out of an abundance of caution, were making your quarterly estimated payments and overpaying. You thought it was going to be a better year than it turned out to be, and so you've paid in more than you should have. The government can sure use the interest-free loan, but when you go to file your tax return, maybe you're entitled to lots of that money back. That's kind of one set of circumstances, which by the way, I think is easier to see shouldn't import additional scrutiny versus amended returns where you filed, you paid all your tax, and then you, a year later, let's say, go to file an amended return saying, I want most of that money back. That is much more likely to be scrutinized.
Well, you give some solutions to this problem because obviously everybody would like to get that money back. It's fairly useful, but you can apply it to future tax, which isn't a bad idea.
Yeah, that's right. It's there is and obviously we're sort of making generalizations, and I guess in some ways that's dangerous. But you're right. I do point out, and it's a well documented technique that if you are filing, let's say, an amended return, particularly, you may want to think about not asking for all the money back and rather saying, and as many viewers as I'm sure know, there's a place on the return to do this once you compute the amount of refund you're entitled to. This is true on an initial return or an amended return. You can say, amount that you want refunded to you, and then there's another line for amount you want applied to future taxes, and you designate what so that typically it would be the next quarterly tax payment. And often by kind of manipulating that or thinking about it creatively, I think you can, in a legitimate way, reduce your exposure to audit.
Is it logical in this example that the IRS actually calculates or watches what you're doing over time in your tax filing history, and say you're breaking even most of the time, and suddenly you have this big deduction because of, I don't know, a business loss, and you're entitled to a big refund? Do they look at the history and make some sort of judgment?
Yeah, I don't know, and I don't think anyone knows the answer to that. I think the assumption by many people is, as is implicit in your question, Scott, that they probably do. That something that is out of the ordinary, whether it's a out of the ordinary huge blip upward in income, or as you were saying, an out of the ordinary blip down in income, with the corollary of a refund, and sort of which of those two things is more important, the sort of aberration in the income level or the fact that you're getting a big refund. I don't think anybody really knows. I think it's one of those issues though that you want to think about and take, as I point out in the article, try to take into account if you're sort of taking money from one place and putting it in a different pocket, if you are going to owe very soon estimated payments anyway, it may behoove you to simply apply some or all of it forward to those estimated payments.
And on the other side, too, if by some chance you file and your refund isn't as large as you thought it would be, you actually can contact the IRS and let them investigate further. And that can be helpful.
Yeah, that's right. And I gave some of the contact info in the article. You're right. And, anytime that you do that, you have to be patient. Calling the IRS is sometimes, depending on the time of year, it can be trying. But there is a system. They have both a web-based way of doing it and a telephone-based way of doing it, which is pretty simple. And you can at least get status reports on those kinds of issues. One other thing I should say, which I believe I point out in the article, and I think it's a big danger, and that is, I guess because I'm focusing here on sort of should you or shouldn't you ask for the money back, and if so, how should you ask? And then, as you were saying, when you follow up by phone or internet, how do you do that? But you might assume that if you sort of get to the bottom of the page, you get your refund, that you're done. That is of course wrong. That is, if you get a tax refund, whether it's based on an initially filed return or based on an amended return, there is always a period of time the IRS has to change their mind. I think we've covered statute of limitations in other podcasts, but generally speaking, 3 years is the major tax statute of limitations. So it does happen that people, even with amended returns, it does happen that people file an amended return, get money back, they're happy, they think they're done, and then a year later they get a letter from the IRS saying, we think erroneously we granted you a refund and we want the money back with interest. And then of course you can fight about it, but they are within rights to do that.
Rob Wood is partner at Wood & Porter in San Francisco. You can find PDFs of this article and many more at woodporter.com. Also here on the Tax Law Channel on the Legal Broadcast Network. Rob, a pleasure. Thanks.
Thank you, Scott.